history, men left their household for periods at a time to hunt or gather food for their families. However, severe food shortages during economic crises fueled by climate change often force men to leave their wives and children permanently. This in search of desperately needed income elsewhere to support their families. Today, we look at stories of women in rural Africa who are left behind and the challenges they often face raising children alone. We also hear what can be done in this situation. Hello, I am Oriani Tangishaka, and this is Our Voices. With me here in studio is my colleague, Jeannie Niwa. How are you doing, Jeannie?
All right.
That's great. Seminesh is out today.
That's right.
Well, Jeannie, separation is devastating for couples and families. Should men continue to leave with the notion that life would be better if they go out seeking for food? Or should they stay and deal with the impact of climate change with their wives? Or maybe even migrate together, so for the sake of just staying together?
That's a very good question. I think we have to look at it not, in a Western way. Regardless, men have to be a provider. So the ideal situation, of course, is to have your men near you, but at the end of the day, the man has to provide. Mm-hmm. So I think it's accepted that the men will leave. However, is he coming back? Mm-hmm. Are you abandoning your family? How do you provide by, being in a long distance? And
yeah.
that's
a good question in terms of, is he coming back? Because for me, like you said, maybe the Western way of looking at it, I want the lovely, lovely husband to be always next to me. But the issue is when he leaves to go provide and never comes back. So essentially, it doesn't become a marriage anymore. It just becomes like a economic arrangement.
Yes, yeah.
And its side.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I agree with you. There are men who leave and they continue to provide and maybe even come once in a while, which is very tough. We've seen men have to cross the ocean to go through different lands, European countries and things like that. And they risk their lives to try to provide for their families. The sad part is when they actually leave and find better pastures and realize that, look, that responsibility over there is just not mine anymore. And the women are left to fend for themselves and their children. And we're going to see more of this in today's episode on how the challenges are and the burdens are left on women. Yeah. Right? In a special report produced by VOA's Portuguese service, we take you to the southern part of Angola, where women have seen their husbands leave them behind because of the drought affecting their region for many years. Now, alone and abandoned, women say they struggle to feed their children. Israel Campos visited some of the women impacted by the extreme weather conditions and climate, even as this report. He has this report.
These desperate babies crying in the scorching sun have never met their father. He left before they were born. Their mother, 38-year-old Katina Teresa, says the twins, Jair and Jaira, were born in December 2022 and are two of her 6 children. Teresa raises them as a single mother. She says her children aren't orphaned. Their father, she adds, just disappeared.
I have nothing. I have nothing to give the children. I don't have soap to wash their clothing, nor food to feed them.
Do you plan to search for your husband? Do you want him back?
No, he did not call me. He ran away from here. He won't come back anymore. He ran away.
Teresa is one of many women in several villages in the region who saw their partners leave in search of a better life during the most intense years of the cyclical drought that has been affecting southern Angola for over 30 years. The women who in the most intense years of the drought between 2019 and 2022 saw many of their husbands turn into climate migrants. While some came back after some time, others never returned. This is where the 38-year-old Katina Teresa lives with her children. The mother of 6 has to support and take care of them by herself since the husband has left 2 years ago. and gone to Namibia. Here they say he's gone missing since he hasn't said anything or sent any message since then. Katina has to count on her 80-year-old mother to look after the children while she has to travel long distances in search of water.
When my daughter goes to fetch water, I have to take care of the twins. I can get them on my back to accompany their mother to fetch water, so I can only sit with them until she returns.
Southern Angola's rural population continues to face many challenges. The lack of food and water is still the main concern. People tell Voice of America that they have seen many of their neighbors die of hunger and suffer from malnutrition in previous years.
We had 4 years without rain. Since the famine arrived here in the Bada area, many men had to abandon their women. The men said they were going to get food, but never came back.
Selepo is a farmer. She has 4 children of her own, but still takes care of 2 nephews. Her husband has not abandoned her. She says he's a climate refugee who started going to the capital, Luanda, at the height of the drought here in Shibia. Unlike some other cases, Selepo's husband travels back very often.
He goes to Luanda because of the needs we face here. Because of the drought here, there's no money, the cattle die, and that's why he goes to Luanda to look for better living conditions, and then he sends us money.
51-year-old Mwechia Wiza Kuchia wakes up early every day to take care of the few livestock he has left. Kuchia was in Luanda for almost 2 years. He says that life is not easy in the capital city either.
In Luanda, I worked in an iron factory. It was my brother who got me the job, but things weren't easy.
Now that he's back in Shibia, a town in the province of Huila, it's up to him to take care of an entire kimbo, which is a set of houses that form a rural community known in the local language Mbondo. He looks after 5 families, including his 4 brothers, who also went to Luanda because of the drought, left their wives and children in his care.
When my brother's children are sick, I use my money to buy medicine, but there are days when I don't have any money either, so I have to go into debt to support their women and children.
The International Organization for Migration, IOM, defines climate migrant as those who must leave their homes and communities because of the effects of climate change and global warming. According to data from Amnesty International, which cites local organizations, in May 2021 alone, more than 7,000 Angolans had crossed the Namibian border because of the drought in the southern part of the country.
The villages are completely abandoned in the hands of women, children, the elderly, and people with disabilities because men are taking refuge to other locations, fleeing hunger and death. They are going to Luanda, Kunene, Namibia, and even to other countries.
Cecilia is a preeminent activist in the southern region of Angola, working with an organization called Association Building Communities. For years, she has been advocating for the rights of the most vulnerable communities. She says the government's lack of action for those affected by the drought is one of her biggest concerns.
Our government does not want to be touched by human suffering. It does not want to be touched by these people who have lost their dignity. In the struggle for human rights, nothing is more painful and humiliating than seeing another human being die of hunger. They die with no dignity.
Voice of America reached out for comments from the Angolan government, but the 2 departments we contacted declined our requests. Priest Pio Wakusanga has been advocating for the hardships many Angolans face in the southern region due to poverty and hunger.
When people heard that we had a community kitchen, they all started coming, including adults, men, women, and children. Some had to walk more than 90 or 100 kilometers, sleeping along the way for a few days, eating leaves along the way, until they finally reached us.
While the situation of poverty, hunger, and food insecurity of Angola's widows of the drought and children continues to get worse by the day, activists and non-governmental organizations on the ground continue to call on the Angolan government to declare an emergency situation so that most vulnerable people can receive the assistance they deserve.
Thanks, Israel Campos, for that really very good report. A lot of times people might say, we can make issues look like women are affected more than men in many cases. This is a clear example of when that actually happens, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, this climate migration is really an example of, how it's affecting women directly. And I mean, we've seen here, like 2 years seems like a long time to
2 years.
Yeah, to look for something. I think we can clearly call it an abandonment.
Yeah, and in rural areas, you can live for 2 years. Women face that a lot. They live for 2 years, no sign of life, no contact, but the woman is left to face the sorrow in the children's eyes and things like that. And then the sad part about it is that in urban areas, women can actually get a job, an extra job, and hopefully have someone help them with the children, but get an extra job. But in the rural area, there's no other options.
No.
They're just still waiting for someone to come through.
Yeah.
And it's very sad when a man doesn't come back or at least show sign of life and send a letter, send some kind of communication. So women are affected more for sure.
Yeah, and we see this man who's taking care of 5 different families.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah, just because one man didn't come back or their husbands didn't come back. So and the uncle had to take care of his brothers, wives and children, and it's very devastating. Rural areas are very tough when it comes to the effects of climate change.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get back to that. We'll have to take a pause right now. It is time for a short break. When we return, we'll hear from an expert who has hands-on experience with women who have been left behind by their men and share how climate change sometimes is the main reason for their departure. As usual, we ask you to share your thoughts on this topic on our social media platform at VOA Africa. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Use the hashtag VOA Our Voices. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
You're watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in
Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices, and we're talking about women who have seen their husbands leave them behind because of the effect of climate change, especially in the rural parts of Africa. Now we introduce you to Jen Naini Meriwas, the Executive Director of Samburu Women Trust in Kenya, an indigenous women-led organization that champions for the rights of women and girls among pastoralists. She joins us via Skype from Nanyuki, Kenya. Welcome, Ms. Meriwas. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me in your show. I'm doing quite well.
Right. Jen, recently in May, the indigenous women from your region of Asal gathered to protest, calling on the government to take proactive measures in minimizing the climate change related disasters like drought and floods, saying these disasters have led to a rise of rising female-headed households as women are left behind or separated from their husbands, unable to cope with the loss of livestock, which is the primarily livelihood for them. What was the government's response?
Thank you so much for having me in this show. And when we talk about impact of climate change, focusing on rural women, mostly nomadic pastoralist community in the region I come from, it has impacted negatively both women and girls because when their husbands move away with their livestock because you're a nomadic community, go look after their animals for several months, like the recent drought, almost like 3 years when we didn't have rains. And then you imagine for a very long time, and then all those animals are wiped away, and then their husbands come back with nothing. And women are there taking care of their children with nothing. The repercussion is, there's a lot of trauma both to the male, but to the women, there's more gender-based violence because meant to trigger more violence to the women. So it also impacts negatively to the girl child because definitely they become the breadwinner and the breadwinner where they are trading them for livestock and sell them at a tender age. So in terms of early marriages, so also girls suffer in triple. So basically, in terms of climate change, women have turned out to manual job, moving nearer towns, doing manual job around issues like cooking alcohol, prostitution, selling small dukas, so that they are able to feed their families. As well as also the impact of climate change that you've seen that most families are separated. And you find that in the rural areas, most of the families are headed by women who are taking care of their families. Some of the husbands, when they go looking after their animals, they don't come back to their family when they lost their livelihood as a result of drought. They disappear from nowhere and they don't return. And those ones who return, they return with a lot of frustration, impacting also negatively to the same women in terms of start now beating them. So more gender-based violence to the homestead also triggered to divorce among the women. And to those families who have girls, you become now the brunt of the conflict because your father now tends to trade you with other men on early marriages so that they can have back to the livestock.
Terrible, terrible situation. And let's touch on that. What about those husbands? Do you think the reason for the ones who don't come back, is it because they're having a hard time to reach their family?
Once, yes, because of the society and the negative put and the pressure on men that you're supposed to feed your family. And because they don't have that courage to come and face the reality, they tend, some of them even to kill themselves, some of them even just to disappear, and they never return. And because there is no support system in the community where men are supposed to come back and change back in the society, it becomes difficult for them. But again, when you look keenly, I would prefer sometimes it's better if men disappear rather than coming back and start now causing more mayhem to the women who have been trolling and supporting their children in their absence.
Yeah, so do you think that when that situation actually happens where it seems as if it's better that they stay where they are, do the women triumph against all odds? What happens to the women, eventually in your experience?
What we've been doing generally to support these families who are having impacted negatively, both women and girls, to retain them in schools, is that we've been supporting them with seed capital, having them cash transfer, and also giving them life skills, knowledge that they are able to do small entrepreneurship, selling small vegetables, starting kitchen garden, and also having small mobile shops where they are able to sustain their families. And to the girls, for us to retain them in school so that they don't get early marriages, as well as also being forced to undergo, female genital mutilation and married off at tender age. We retain them in school by, one, supporting them sanitary pads, paying their school fees, and making sure that the girls also are safe in some of the areas. For those women who are experiencing gender-based violence, as a result of that, they've lost all their livestock. We also give them social support system, but also supporting them in alternative livelihood so that they can have back their dignity. For those who are affected, impacted by either by beaten or even by, harm by their husband, we'd give them medical support so that they can also see a counselor and they're able to regain back their dignity and to come back to the society so that they continue feeding their family in a dignified way.
Yeah. Well, you are really, really supporting those families. You are doing an excellent job. So you also are the national convener of the Indigenous Women Council in Kenya, and your annual conference is coming up. Tell us more about the organization and upcoming meeting.
The key highlights within Samburu Women Trust that we normally, this is the 9th annual Women Conference, which we are bringing on board all the leadership, women at the national level, National Assembly, and then also the county government, as well as also other partners across the region, trying to deliberate and assist and access what is the situation we are talking about when you talk about climate change and how it's impacting negatively on Indigenous women, those who are living in rural in areas that they cannot be accessed. How do we look critically around issues on policy and see, do this policy that the government is talking about, how is it impacting negatively? How do we also influence some of these issues as Indigenous women, as even voices of women, so that the government can also change the policy we feel that they're not friendly to us. And even our main things here is to make sure that our issue, our collective voice as Indigenous women, is heard by the government. When you look at the landscape where Indigenous women live, most of these issues are underlying. Majority of them, the pastoralists, hunter-gatherer, fisher folks, as well as also women who live with a disability. And we want the government to hear, one, our issue, two, articulate our issues, as well as also when they develop policy, we want to be on the table, not people to discuss our issues. We want us to discuss our issues on the same table, decision making.
And rightfully speaking, it sounds like you're closing the gaps where government isn't able to reach some of these women in rural areas. But in essence, how many do you actually serve, or perhaps how many would you like to be serving at this time? How many women and children?
This time, so far we are able to reach, for the last 3 months, we were able to reach close to 3,000 women, and we are able to retain 500 girls in several schools, both supporting them, paying them their school fees, buying them school uniform, retaining them by giving them dignity kits, and making sure that during the school holiday, we also host mentorship for them to prepare young girls to equip them in terms of building their self-esteem and making sure that also young girls start preparing in terms of leadership.
So would you want to be working more with the government, and what exactly is your long-term goal of how many people you want to reach, or how many other counties that are going through the similar issues that you would like to touch? Because this is something that is in the sight of climate change is not going to end soon. What is your end game in the future?
We work very closely, both the national government and the county government, trying to engage them in terms of when they're developing of the policy, making sure that the policy are very friendly and the issues of Indigenous women are taken care of, and also supporting them, making sure that the policies in place, they are disseminated and simplified in the language that local community can understand, in the language that it is being simplified, but also supporting them going to the vernacular radio station and talking and demystifying the policy, and making also sure participation of rural women is very effectively and understand the issues that the government want to put in place. Our bridge is to make sure that the issues of women and girls is put at the table, and the government can raise our concern at different levels.
What about a last message to men? Perhaps those who are still there, those who have left. What is your message to them?
Pardon?
Message to the men who are still there with their women, or a message to the men who have left and never came back?
To the men who have left their family, we want to send them a very strong message. Please come back and take the responsibility, because those children, those women needs you. For those men who have had the courage to come back and live with their family, please protect their family and protect those women, and don't subject them to gender-based violence.
Thank you so much for your insight in what's going on in the rural parts of Africa, rural parts of Kenya, and the things that people are going through. We've also heard the things that are happening in Angola. It seems that there are different parts of Africa that are facing climate change, and some of the things that are being done. Thank you so much. We appreciate it, Ms. Meriwas.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And that's our show for today. We hope today's show shed light on how economic crisis fueled by global warming is affecting families, especially in parts of the continent. Thanks to our guest, Jane Naini Meriwas, the Executive Director of Samburu Women Trust in Kenya, and was our colleague Israel Campos from the Portuguese division for the report that we've seen earlier. Be sure to watch our voices on VOA's website at voaafrica.com and our YouTube channel, where you can catch up on the latest episodes and top news stories around the globe. Last but not least, thanks to our editorial and production team here on Our Voices. And on behalf of VOA, thanks for watching. Until next time, cheers.